This is the Mobile Tech Podcast, brought to you by worldpodcasts.com. Now here's your host, Tech Girl, Miriam Joie.
Brought to you by Mint Mobile. Stay tuned for a special offer at the end of the show. Hi, and welcome to the Mobile Tech Podcast. I'm your host, Miriam Joie, and today is Friday, December 5th, 2025. And I'm here with Matteo Doni, all the way from the UK. Hi, Matteo. How are you?
Very well, thanks. Thanks for having me back, Miriam. Always a pleasure to be on the show.
Absolutely. You know, it's always a delight to have you on the show. And there's some interesting stuff this week. We have the Samsung Galaxy Z TriFold to dive into, at least the little bit we know about it. And then we have a bunch of news, OnePlus stuff, a bunch of other Chinese devices. Obviously, with the chips coming out a little earlier this year, we are getting a lot more devices before the holidays, our holidays at least. And so, it's been interesting that way. But also I want to talk EVs with you because I got a chance to sit down in the BMW iX3. And I think that's going to be a pretty exciting car. So, yeah. What are your thoughts on this TriFold that was just announced this week?
It's good to see Samsung is still in the game and it's pushing the envelope forward with regards to form factors. But we know quite well that there have been other trifolds out before. It's just they're not targeted at Western markets. So good to see that this is starting to happen. More choice is always good.
Indeed.
What I will be interested in seeing is how it actually lives up to daily use. I've been quite resistant to the sirens of foldables over the last few years. Last year, I took the jump with the Samsung Galaxy Z Flip 6.
Oh.
And I love that little device.
You did, huh?
Yes, and I still use it on a daily basis. It's my going out in the evening phone that fits in a shirt pocket and doesn't get me into too much trouble.
I think the flips are great. That's why I was like, oh, yeah. I think in general, my favorite phones right now, folding phones, are not the Samsung ones. I think Samsung, especially with the Z Fold 7 and the Z Flip 7 this year, has finally upped their game to, be competitive in a segment they should own because they really started it, right? Chinese manufacturers, especially Huawei, it's hard to say because a lot of them are. Xiaomi, Oppo, Huawei, I feel like is, pushing the envelope the hardest. Like they have that crazy laptop that folds in half and stuff, right? Like we've seen that from Lenovo, we've seen that from Asus, but we've never seen it that thin, that light, that sexy, right? And they did the TriFold first. They're on the second generation TriFold. That's what I'm trying to say. So Samsung was kind of sitting on their laurels, being the creator, I feel like, and they needed a bit of a kick, right? And I think we got that with the Z Fold 7 and the Z Flip 7. But that being said, back to the Chinese, I have been using the Oppo Find N5 for the whole, pretty much since it came out, as my folding phone of choice because it's better than the Z Fold 7. It's just as thin, for one thing. It has way better battery life because it's silicon carbon battery, so it's much bigger battery capacity. It has a digitizer, which I don't use, but it's there. And, Samsung dropped the S Pen support on the Z Fold 7. And it has better cameras. The telephoto is significantly better, at least. And the main sensor might not be a 200 megapixel sensor on the Oppo, but it's a really high quality 50 megapixel sensor. And you get the Hasselblad camera stuff, right? So, I can't go wrong with that phone. And literally, I've been using it almost daily. It's not my daily phone because it's a Pixel still, but like my second productivity phone. If I'm on an airplane writing a story and I'm crammed in economy and I can't really open a laptop and be comfortable opening a laptop, that's the phone I use. And, it's rock solid, fast charging, wireless charging, everything's there. The only thing that they kind of like detuned compared to the OnePlus Open, which was the Find N3 before that, was the ultra wide, which is only an 8 megapixel, kind of like a baby ultra wide, right? But honestly, day to day, you don't really notice that. I also have a Pixel 10 Pro XL as a camera if I really need to. iPhones are always in my bag if I need them. So, I think for me, that's what I want to point out. I think Samsung has made a great effort, but they're still not at parity with the best of China, at least TriFold aside. Like I'm setting the stage because I want people to understand that to me, yes, the Z Fold 7 is amazing. I love that the design looks honestly more sexy in some ways than the Oppo Find N5. And I think the reason for that is that squared off design is really unique, right? It emphasizes the thinness of the phone. But then when you put them side by side, you're like, oh, they're the same thickness. So whatever,
Yeah.
right?
But then again, Honor's Magic V5, I've spent
Yeah,
a
I
couple
don't
of
have
months
it,
with
but
that.
it's the same deal, right? It's another one that I was going to bring up as a solid competitor to the Z Fold 7. So that being said, on the flip side of it, literally on the flip folding phone side of things, to me, the Razer Ultra is the phone to beat. Like, I still think that Samsung, did good to go full cover screen like they did. That was necessary, but given the choice for me, there's absolutely no, especially in North America where I can buy the Razer from a carrier, from a store. Like, to me, the Razer is the flip phone to beat. It is the defining flip phone, and it's a Chinese phone if you think about
Yeah.
it. So,
What I would say is that the Razer Ultra is a Lenovo phone, but it still has some old Motorola DNA. They didn't want to reinvent the
absolutely.
wheel, so they just lean on the native Android software stack.
That's what I love about
Whereas
it.
Samsung tried to do everything or rebuild the wheel themselves, and they just don't get it quite right. And you have to use workarounds for certain apps on the cover screen. It doesn't feel right to me.
That's my point. Is like Moto, like Theo has the older Moto Razr, the original 2023 model, the plus, the top of the line when they finally went full screen in the front, right? And they don't use the apps on the front at all. Like, they just use the fronts as widgets and, notifications, that stuff, like music playback. They don't care about apps, but I do. And the fact that a device can serve both end of the spectrum of users is what I'm talking about. This is where I feel like, Moto has the edge, pardon the pun, since they make a Moto Edge. God, I'm full of puns today. But look, the thing I'm trying to get to is that you can't go wrong with the Z Flip. It's a solid phone. There's no doubt about it. Like, for me, it's just, I'm not as excited about One UI. One UI is not my thing on Samsung phones in general. And if I look objectively at the folding phone market and I'm not constrained by buying a US market device, to me, it's either Magic V5, as you pointed out, or even better, in my opinion, because I like the software so much, like the OnePlus, Oppo, Realme software, Oppo Find N5. And I can't wait for the N6 right now. So, setting that stage, that being said, the only options you have right now of buying a TriFold are going to be Huawei Gen 2, which is a minor revision of their Gen 1 phone, or the new Galaxy Z TriFold. And objectively, because of Google services, because of the fact that the TriFold from Huawei exposes one of, the display significantly by being a Z-shaped folder, and the Samsung TriFold folds upon itself and still has a proper external display, I think Samsung's winning. And also, it's basically, and you tell me what you think of this. Is this my assessment correct, that this is a Z Fold 7 with an extra panel and more battery because of it? Essentially, the camera specs are the same. The battery is a bit bigger. The processor is the same. External display is the same. The cover one. What do you think? Am I right? That's basically it, right?
On paper it is, but I'll caveat this with, I've not actually played with the device.
No,
I've not used it.
Neither of us have.
What I would say is, it's always down to the implementation and certain product decisions they make around how the screens are used. So it might be that Huawei obviously are not using a real Android operating system. They are using a different OS that might have been built from the ground up to deal with that scaling or handshake between displays. If it treats that 1/3 of the TriFold as a single display, or if it can use two. So it's all down to the dynamics of that. I think, yes, going back to what you're saying about it uses part of the big screen.
I mean, I'm not
the
saying
cover
that,
screen.
like, I'm just saying, like, conceptually, it is a Z, like, because of the specs, it is a Z Fold 7 with an extra panel and a wider inner screen. That's it.
And I think Samsung did a good thing on having the cover screen. But the proof in the pudding is actually using it and seeing how people end up with a phone after a year of use.
Yes.
In the Huawei, for example, is the edge that's exposed that's not being used for particular software functions, is that going to get ruined because it is exposed? Is the Samsung solution going to be better? It might be that everyone's reviewing this now and saying this is great, but then 6 months, a year down the line, we find out that it wasn't the best design decision. And I think Samsung have played it safe. Samsung are going the safe route, have a dedicated external screen, and make One UI do all the heavy lifting to give the users the best user experience.
But I'm very critical of Samsung always, and I still believe this was the right call. I think that Huawei is really kind of making possibly a mistake with this Z shape, because invariably a flexible OLED screen that's at the edge of your phone when the phone is folded is asking for a problem. Now, there's so few devices out there, right? The Huawei Mate X or whatever it's called, that it's like we don't have any data, right? But I am sure that there's been some people with screen replacements because of this already. Whereas this is not going to happen with Samsung. Like, the nice thing is that if it is a Z Fold 7, the tight fold is already clearly bulletproof, because I've not heard of anybody having issues with Z Fold 7 at all. And I feel like Samsung, and again, I told you Motorola is kind of my pick for the Flip, but I think in terms of durability and like water immersion, dust, all that stuff, I think Samsung is, in hinge design, I think Samsung's ahead of maybe everybody but Huawei at this point. So,
we'll see. I mean, we could infer it from the original folding generation. Huawei took exactly the same approach, the foldable that was just the external screen.
But then they did another one, right? That was normal, like what we expect today of a fold. Yeah.
But just going by that, and anecdotally knowing a lot of people who had that phone, they had to have frequent screen replacements just because of that exposed edge. And I would assume that if people put that device in a pocket or in a bag, they'll be facing the same challenges.
Right. And so what I'm trying to say to me is, if you look at Samsung's design, you have essentially a Z Fold 7, that hinge is proven, that's the tight hinge. And then you have this less tight second hinge that's much looser, where the glass doesn't bend nearly as much. And I think that one's, I'm really not worried about that one, right? And I think that is pretty impressive. And also to see the thinness of the three panels, right? We have a 3.9 millimeter, 4.2 in the middle, and 4 millimeters for the panels. Remember the phone, the Z Fold 7 is, I believe, 4.2 both sides, or something like that. And so they've managed to make these two blades on either side of the center screen blade, even thinner, which is really impressive. And I think part of the way they did it is that by using some sort of, like carbon reinforced plastic back cover instead of glass. Like the only part of the phone that doesn't have a display on it is, like the camera side and the extra flip side there, or the extra, edge or blade, whatever you want to call it. I think this thing is fascinating. And here's the kicker. I'll be honest with you. Even though I don't like One UI, I want it bad, because I'm like, this has proper Android on it. And looking at my use case, which is the most of the time that I use my Oppo Find N5 is on an airplane when I'm cramped and I need some sort of device that can fit in my pocket but grow into something I can use two-handed to have a bigger screen experience, but without necessarily pulling out a keyboard and accessories and a stand and whatever. Like, thumb type. That is, now I can thumb type with the two halves of the keyboard on each side and have even more real estate to write. That's what I want. And still have Android and still make phone calls and still have that cover screen for basic stuff. Like when I'm waiting in line in the jetway, I can still type on one-handed on the front cover, right? Like that is, I am so there. Like I want this. If this thing goes on sale at a reasonable price, I'm saying right now, let's say less than $27.50 US. I might buy it.
So we will find out about if you can buy it in Western markets.
Well, US is definitely coming. We know that. We're going to find that out at CES apparently.
Yes.
So, Yes.
So I think we should do some scientific testing after a few drinks at CES. We'll see if it survives our day-to-day use. Because I'll be there this year as well.
Oh, great. I'll see you there then. So yeah, folks, just a quick update. I will put links in the show notes for all the stuff we're talking about as usual. But just to let you know, Samsung sets an event for CES called The First Look in quotes. It's on January 4th with TM Rowe, who is the CEO of Samsung and the head of device experience. So to your point, I think this could be the part where they show us what they've done to One UI to take advantage of this new form factor, right? Because I don't know, what do you think? Like, there are some challenges in making a device. Like, we know Android tablets aren't great, right?
Scalability is an issue especially when you're dynamically moving between sizes, between actual physical screens. There is that moment of crisis. The operating system says, wait a moment. That's why you have those little zoom effects, is to cover that up.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
So hands-on will be key for us to see how it actually works, because the TriFold is a slightly wider aspect ratio compared to the standard squarish ones. It'll be interesting to see how it works.
Yeah, I'm actually really excited about it simply because, as I said, my use case, but I think that consuming content is another area where I'm excited about this phone, because it's like every now and then you want to watch some Netflix while you're on an airplane, and you can just pull this thing out of your pocket and kind of wedge it somewhere, and then you have a 10-inch screen basically.
Is that Netflix you watch on planes on foldable phones going to be Netflix, Warner Brothers, HBO Max all in one?
I only have a Netflix and an Apple TV Plus subscription right now, and the Apple TV Plus I'm going to drop. The reason I have it is because it was free through my carrier, T-Mobile. I don't think I'm paying anything at all for Netflix on T-Mobile, which is why I have it.
Okay.
So,
no, I'm just referring to today's news that Netflix has agreed to purchase Warner Brothers HBO Max.
I missed that.
So it's going to be really awkward to say Netflix, HBO Max, Warner Brothers, and chill. It just doesn't sound right. But it's happening.
I see. I wasn't aware. But here's the thing. I was an HBO Max customer for a while because at the time I was an AT&T customer alongside being a T-Mobile customer. And they was provided for free. Like, I honestly don't like paying for subscriptions. I've got very few. I've got a few that I pay for mostly as a business expense, like my YouTube Music or YouTube Premium, if you wish, because I'm a YouTube creator and I listen to a ton of music. And so I have a family plan for Theo and I. And I don't want to see any ads on YouTube. I'm sorry. So that I'm willing to pay for. But in terms of video, we're not big video watchers other than YouTube. And, there are other ways to obtain videos if you know what you're doing, right? So
yes, but dear listeners, please do wait for the Mint Mobile ad that's coming up at the end of this show.
Exactly. And you'll get a good deal. And so I think for me that this TriFold, it's also going to be interesting to see how much more content friendly it is, right? Because I do travel a ton and I hate the idea of pulling out, first of all, I'm not a tablet user. I do have a bunch of tablets. They're nice. Mostly they're OnePlus tablets and they're really nice, but they're not productivity devices for me. I really literally just use my, this totally overkill, Snapdragon 8 Elite or whatever, OnePlus pad for watching Netflix while in the tub, like taking a hot bath. It's complete overkill. I could pull out my MacBook and put it there and do the same thing. So
I'm a bit more practical there. I always have an Amazon Fire tablet just for content consumption.
Yeah, and that's
reading, browsing the web,
that's the point, right? If you have an affordable tablet for content consumption in the home, that makes sense.
But even for traveling, it's good because if you leave it in the back of an airplane seat, you're not too upset if you lose it.
But if it's in your pocket and folds into your pocket,
true.
That's what I'm trying to get to. To me, it's not really so much of a cost benefit here. Obviously, it's way cheaper to buy a decent, Pixel 9a or something, and a decent, Fire tablet or whatever it might be, some nice affordable Redmi tablet. That's going to be great. Than to buy a TriFold. The TriFold, it's just not winning proposition. This is going to be a Gen 1 product for Samsung. But I can't resist the appeal because, as I mentioned, it's not really a first-gen product in that sense that it's essentially a Z Fold 7 with extra panel and proven technology, proven OS, Google services, the whole thing. So I don't know. I'm very torn.
Yeah, well, we'll see. How many OnePlus 15s could you pre-order for our speculated price of the Z Fold TriFold?
Well, that's a good question, right? $899 for the OnePlus, so 2.5, I guess. 3?
2.5?
3.
2.7.
Yeah, it's
so,
crazy.
Yeah, so it's around about the same price as 3 OnePlus 15s, going by US pricing.
It's actually interesting you bring that up because that's a good segue to our next topic, which is that you can now pre-order the OnePlus 15 in the US. It passed the FCC because the government, shutdown is done now. So FCC approved it. It's shipping, I think, in a couple of weeks. Pre-orders went up on the 4th, which is, yesterday, basically, as we're recording on a Friday here. It's, I still think it's a great phone. We've kind of covered it to death over the last 2-3 podcasts. But I still think that if you're based in North America and you're looking for a really nice phone, and it's not a Samsung or an iPhone, and you don't need a Motorola folding phone, this is a really phenomenal phone. I just wish they hadn't downgraded the cameras. I wish that it was a bit less iPhone-like in terms of design, but that's minor niggles, honestly. If you are the kind of customer that OnePlus is after, which really, focuses on performance, this is a great phone. But if you're looking for a little more well-rounded device, I think, get the OnePlus 13. It's still available. It's on sale. Better cameras, better imaging pipeline, and almost as good in terms of performance. And I think a more interesting design, a more unique design. That would be my pick. You do lose on battery a bit, but I mean, 6,500 to 7,300, yes, 7,300 is really impressive. But the reality is I have a bunch of phones with 7,000, and I do agree that you can't argue with that. But 6,500 on the OnePlus 13 is going to be perfectly okay, I think, most of the time, right?
Yes, but for most people, they're just going to be using messaging apps and social media and the odd light game like PUBG or Call of Duty Mobile.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think they're going to miss out on too much, to be frank. So I think this is what I'm excited about here is that we now can buy it. Like it was really hard to write a review for a phone that you guys couldn't buy. My review went up on the embargo day on November 12th on hothardware.com. So check it out if you haven't already. But it's such a sad thing when you're writing about a phone and you can't even go out and buy it. So I'm happy to report that is now, being dealt with. And speaking of OnePlus, we've been talking about this again as well for 2 more podcasts or so. The OnePlus Ace 6T is finally official in China. And as I mentioned again on a couple of podcasts, this is a very good indicator as to what we're going to get with a OnePlus 15R that we know is coming. And so we don't have this full specs for the 15R, obviously, but we know it's going to be a Snapdragon 8 Gen 5, not 8 Elite Gen 5. And I want to talk with you about that and get your thoughts on the difference between these 2 chips in a second. Last week, Qualcomm announced that chip, which is also why OnePlus announced that they were the first in the West to use that chip for a phone on the 15R. And of course, the A60 now has that chip as well. The design of the A60 looks physically identical from the photos and videos and teasers of OnePlus for the 15R that we've seen. So A60 looks like 15R, but is everything identical spec-wise? We don't know. Because, here's the thing, like last year's Ace 5, there wasn't a 5T. And, there is a 6 as well. There's an Ace 6. But the 5 became the 13R. But they did change some stuff. Like I think the front-facing camera was different. A few other things for our market, for the West. Will that be the same here? I mean, do you think we're going to get that 8,300 milliamp hour battery in North America and Europe when the 15R comes out? I feel that that's possibly
I think
too
it's
much.
Unlikely. It's unlikely. Also, I think they can get away with it in China because of the regulations about how they can advertise something. And is it really is it really 8,300 milliamp hours, or is it up to and then there's a range in the actual
I mean,
rating.
I honestly feel that every Chinese phone I've gotten with a large battery so far has really generally, when it's been disassembled, has that battery size in it. So I'm not too worried about that. I'm more worried about the fact that, it's like a cost issue and China keeping the best stuff to themselves, and also a regulatory thing. Can they get the testing done the way they want it to get approved by, VD in Germany or CSA in Canada, UL in the US, DIN or whatever it might be. I don't know what you guys have in the UK for approvals like that. But here's the bottom line is, if it has a battery that's anywhere close to the OnePlus 15, the 15R will be a great phone. And I feel like if they detune the battery in any way, it's probably not going to be a huge detune. But I feel like 8300, we're not going to get that. But look, we can extrapolate a few things here, right? We know that what the cameras look like now. So we have a 50 megapixel main sensor with OIS. It's a pretty decent looking sensor. Looks like they haven't detuned too much from the 15 on that, but we're getting an 8 megapixel, baby ultra wide, kind of like the Oppo Find N5. But
that's fine for making cats look big.
Yes, 100%. Like, is that a problem? I don't think so. I think the lack of telephoto is going to be more of a problem, because you're not going to really be able to zoom too much past like 4 or 5x, before things get a little crunchy. Even with the AI zoom algorithms, you really do need that extra reach from the telephoto to really get somewhere. So, but 2x should be okay, because, you're doing in sensor crop and stuff. So, I mean, the big question mark, and you tell me what you think here, Matteo, but to me, will it be a killer phone is based on the price point, right?
The price point and who it's marketed to.
Well, we know who it's going to be marketed to. It's going to be marketed to the value flagship crowd. Like, this is what's really interesting is last year's 13R was using last generation Snapdragon chip, right? HN3. This is using a new chip that is slightly detuned or whatever it might be. And I want your thoughts on that in a second. But this is a proper flagship in many ways. It's using current tech. It's making some compromises. I mean, the OnePlus Ace 6T does not have wireless charging. I expect that's going to be the same with the 15R, right? Now, what will we get? The big battery? We will get the 100-watt charging. I don't know, but I'm sure we will get very fast charging at something like 60 watt, I'm sure, right? So you're getting a bit less, like in terms of like no wireless charging, no telephoto camera, that slightly detuned Snapdragon chip, but you're still getting display-wise, it looks like it's an LTPS version of the LTPO display on the 15, on the Ace 6T. So that's what we should be getting on the 15R. So again, like, they're making a few little concessions, but it's still a flagship in my book. I mean, it's got at least the 6T has a metal frame, like, it's proper. So like, what's the price? Like, if that thing sells for, I think if it's $599 US, like, oh my God. If it's $650 US, that's still really, really good. $699, $750 might be too much.
Yeah, $699, you're going into base iPhone or base Pixel pricing range, and people will go with the safe option there.
And I mean, the base Pixel now, the Pixel 10, non-Pro, has a telephoto. Yes. Has wireless charging. So, yeah, I don't know.
I think it's all down to how it's marketed. Obviously, you and I think of OnePlus and immediately think young person looking to get the most out of it, gamers, people who love running benchmarks on the metro on their way to work. But the whole thing about OnePlus is that their core audience has grown up to a certain extent. And is OnePlus in a position to start selling its products to the extended family of the people who have been net promoters of OnePlus up to this point? So say people who have been using OnePlus for 10 years, they're super into it, but they've grown up a bit, and they've been showing their awesome OnePlus phone to families and friends. Are any carriers such as, say, T-Mobile in the US going to be starting to widen OnePlus's market by selling it to the people who've been exposed to it?
It's not sold by carriers in the US.
Is it not? Okay.
No, the 15 isn't, and I don't think the 15... I mean, I could be wrong, because we don't know about the 15R yet, but
If they continue with direct to consumer, that's fine.
I do not think that OnePlus will get back to carriers in the US. And the reason for that is because they kind of lost that privilege. Honestly, I don't think this was OnePlus's doing. The carriers are always generally the ones, being the troublemakers here on these kind of stuff. But I think if anything, and this is my perception, I have no facts to back this up. This is my thoughts, okay? I just want to make very clear. But I feel like perhaps T-Mobile did not get much out of selling OnePlus phones. They were the big partner. And then OnePlus didn't really make an effort either to kind of like patch the problems they were having, if they were having any. They were coming from this attitude of like, very much a Chinese manufacturer. Like, we're not going to make a phone just for you. Like, we have an audience that's very specific as to what they want. So I think that's kind of why they went back. Like, you can still buy them at Best Buy and get a carrier deal latched on. So like, you know what I'm saying? But I don't think the phone will be locked at that point. It's going to be unlocked. So I think that's the only way around. Amazon will sell it eventually. And of course, OnePlus.com. So, but back to the A6T, I think that this, other than maybe charging speed and battery life, is a very good precursor. And to me, it feels like really a value flagship, not even a premium mid-range, because it's got one of the latest chips from Qualcomm. And so it's really catering even further. Like, I think OnePlus 13 was the most well-balanced they ever done. I think 15 kind of went back to focus on performance and gaming, right? A little more than the camera, and so a bit less well-balanced, in my opinion. But I think the 15R is even more acute. Like, it's like, let's narrow it down even further to that core audience of OnePlus people who really just want the performance at the best, absolute best possible price. And they don't care about little things like a telephoto and a wireless charging. They were looking at maybe buying a Red Magic 11 Pro, right? And it's really quite competitively priced here in the US. It's $750 for a Snapdragon 8 Elite Gen 5 with liquid cooling and a fan. Like, wow. But they're like, that's a lot of money. And so if OnePlus comes in at like 650, 600, like, you're almost going to get that performance, right? And
how much, what sort of risk does OnePlus have with overlapping with the Nord series?
The Nord series does not exist in North America.
Oh, fair enough. Outside of North America.
Yeah, I don't know. That's a good point. Well, the Nord series always has a mid-range processor. So I think performance-wise, if you're just gaming, for example, the 15R is going to be your phone, right? Like the 13R would have been last year, even in the markets that had the Nord. So anyway, Snapdragon 8 Elite Gen 5 versus Snapdragon 8 Gen 5. We have some benchmark results. I'll put them in the show notes. You saw them. What are your thoughts? Like, what do you think Qualcomm did for this chip? Because it's Orion based, so it's got that latest CPU core technology of theirs, right?
Well, we were just mentioning this earlier, just before the show, that I think there's two lines of thought here. We don't know the specifics. Maybe someone from Qualcomm can give us a pointer on this if they're listening to the show. Is this a bin chip, or is it a deliberately designed, slightly less powerful chip because they know that the sort of person using that device will not be running benchmarks on the metro on their way to work?
Yeah.
Is this an elite chip or a good quality chip, a flagship chip, but not for the people who need to have the absolute best? In terms of cars, it would be, do you need the S-Line or the RS version of a car, or do you just want a nice, comfortable car that doesn't break your back as you go over potholes?
Yeah, so like the article here from GSM Arena states that both are listing the GPUs as Adreno 840, but when they look and go deeper into this, checking out the, what various apps return in terms of info, they're different GPUs. Like OpenCL lists them as slightly different. And so I'm just wondering, like, here's kind of what I'm thinking is happening. And I think you're partially right. I think that we're seeing a binned version of the Orion cores. Like, the CPU is an Orion. It's an 8 Elite Gen 5, just tuned down and binned a bit. And then the GPU might be slightly different. Like,
okay, so if it's a system on a chip, that means there is a conscious choice to have a slightly different design.
I feel that that's the case, in the same way as in previous years when Qualcomm was repackaging the previous chip in a new way, like 8 Gen 4 or whatever, 8S Gen 4, whatever it was called, 8 Plus Gen 4. I can't remember. I can't keep track. Please, Qualcomm, Sasha, if you're listening, if I, who remembers specs for every phone ever made, cannot remember the name of your chips, you need to fix your naming convention. Please, please.
What's wrong with 4 numbers? Just give us 4 numbers.
Oh my God. Yeah, those were the days. 800, 600. Anyway, but look, I think we'll find out. Like, I'm getting a device, so in advance, so I can't tell you more than that. But as you know, the release date, the launch date is December 17th for the 15R. So draw your own conclusions. You should see a review from me on that day, and I'll have some benchmarks, so I'll know and I'll be able to tell you what I found out. And whether you're making a big sacrifice by losing the telephoto, if there's more than a detuned ultra wide. Again, assuming the specs for the cameras are the same as the Ace 6T. But I'm actually more excited about the 15R, Matteo, than the 15. Like the 15, I love the finish, the way it feels in hand, even though it's too iPhone-like in shape for me. Like, I don't like flat screens as much. Like, no, don't get me wrong. I don't like the curved screens where the actual screen curves. I like the 2.5D that they did in the 13, where it's a flat screen underneath a slightly rounded edge on the side, so you can do the gestures much easier. I like that. And I'm not a huge fan of slab sides and copying the iPhone, which is all the Chinese are doing right now. But I have to say, the build quality, the finish, the material, that sandstorm finish on the OnePlus 15 is, oh my God, it feels like paper. It's incredible. And it's super durable. Like, I have literally scratched the screen of my Oppo Find X9 Pro accidentally by slipping the 15 without a case, because they didn't give us a case for the 15, in the pocket of my pants where the X9 Pro was in a case. But I did camera pod against screen, and I have a couple of scuff marks there because that camera pod is that crazy material, the micro arc oxidation finish that's like harder than ceramic. And of course, doesn't matter what glass you have, ceramic will beat glass. So I got a couple of scuff marks on my, and I was so mad at first. I was like, oh, it's just like a smudge. Oh no. And then I remember like, oh yeah, it slipped into my pocket and immediately noticed and immediately took it out. And I was like, didn't think about that as a big deal. I was like, oh yeah, I tried to avoid putting 2 phones in my pocket because I've had disastrous scratches and things from that. But anyway, so I don't think the 15R will have that kind of finish, but it looks like it's going to be metal frame, and it looks like we're going to get some pretty solid numbers out of that chip. And then some compromise, but really for me, it's the price. Like, but right now, I'm kind of excited about it because 13R last year was really great, and let's see what this brings to the table. Wouldn't you say?
Yes, I'm always happy when OnePlus make a callback to the original OnePlus One, the original one,
yeah,
with that sandpaper back.
Yeah,
it's one of those historic phones that makes me all warm and fuzzy.
Speaking of cool phones, in the sense that we know Moto makes great phones because we love their software, but also the Edge 70, which is not sold in North America, but is available in your market, is super thin, like 6 millimeters, which is just a little thicker than an iPhone Air, and has like a 4,800 milliamp hour battery or something like that, which is exactly what Apple should have done and what Samsung should have done with the S25 Edge. Give us silicon carbon so we have decent battery life. And it
has multiple cameras too.
Well, that's my point. And the Edge 70 is now being bedazzled with Swarovski crystals and a Pantone color. And I kind of love that Moto is unapologetically just going with it and giving us like this completely insane, cool looking Edge 70. So hot, so cool. What do you think?
This is the nouveau hipster version of the phone, because they are essentially marketing this to fashionistas, to people who really want to be seen with the bedazzled Swarovski's phone in that Pantone white.
And I mean,
to you and
not?
me, it's white. Why not? I mean, it's a market that is ripe to be taken. Vertu doesn't really exist anymore.
Right.
That Russian company that used to do blingy phones doesn't exist anymore. And there are still people who want to be seen with something very different and want to be showing off their status symbol.
Absolutely. I think this is great. If you are that person, that hipster, I congratulate you. And you should get yourself an Edge 70 Swarovski Pantone special and limited edition, whatever it's called.
And the challenge is to take it to a nightclub and have the lasers refract against those Swarovski crystals and see where they go.
Well, okay. I challenge those of you in the UK who have a connection with Motorola reviewers, that is, if you're listening, colleagues of ours, get yourself an Edge 70 for CES with the Swarovski crystals and bring it to one of those events we're going to where there'll invariably be some crazy lighting. And let's see what happens.
Notes taken. I'll be reaching out to Wilkin Lee as soon as he's back from
Fantastic.
Vacation.
Please do. We have a couple more news items here from Infinix and Techno that are pretty cool. So Infinix is now partnering with Pininfarina, the design firm from Italy that is known best for designing some of the most iconic cars in the world. So that's actually a pretty interesting partnership, wouldn't you say?
It is. Then again, I have a feeling that a lot of those Italian design companies are trying to desperately to stay relevant and keep their name going, because a lot of the car companies aren't using them anymore. So you have obviously Pininfarina, probably most famous for the Ferrari Testarossa design in the 80s.
Exactly.
You have Momo Design, who used to do helmets and racing car steering wheels.
That's right. Yeah.
Partnering with smartphone brands. It's nice to see but also very sad from an Italian point of view, because I am part Italian, to see this brand's having to try and stay relevant with smartphone and smartphone accessory companies. But that Pininfarina signature, if that's going to be on the packaging or on the device itself, I'm all for it. It's one of those brands that you don't actually read, but you see the shape of it and you understand what it means.
Exactly. I mean, they you said that you mentioned the Testarossa. They're pretty incredible.
Yeah, in our timeline, Miami Vice in part was what it was thanks to the Pininfarina design of the Testarossa.
Absolutely, and it's interesting. A lot of cool Peugeots, Lancias, Alfa Romeos, Ferraris, some Volvos even in there. So we've had a few, like another one that's a little bit more US centric or North American centric, the Cadillac Alante, which was essentially a Corvette redesigned in terms of aesthetics to be a Cadillac, and that is a pretty great looking car. So, yeah, I'm actually excited to see what comes out of this. The rumor or the news, not sure if this is official or not, but they're talking about doing this for the Note 60 Ultra, which would be the next flagship from Infinix. So I'm looking forward to seeing what comes out of that. And similarly, another one, like a sister brand here of Infinix, Techno, is had their Future Lens event. And their Future Lens that showed a couple of really interesting technologies. So you remember, this, you probably even played with these phones. Xperia, right? Sony, for a while there with the Xperia 1 series, had a continuous variable zoom, right? So you had a telephoto, it was a periscope telephoto. And instead of being a set 3x or 5x lens, it could vary from like 2.5 to 6x or something. And basically had a little motor with a lens in there moving back and forth inside the periscope. So Infinix is doing that again. But here's the crazy part. They're going from 1x to 9x continuous and in an ultra compact design. So somehow the lenses are doing crazy stuff inside that periscope. But more importantly, 1x to 9x means your main lens is your telephoto. So you can cut down space inside the phone by removing a telephoto altogether. So now all you need is a 0.5x, 120 degree ultra wide, 50 megapixels, something nice, maybe with autofocus so you can do close-up macro shots. And then you got this crazy module that does, 1x to 9x. It's stabilized. It's got OIS built in with the prisms doing their bouncy stuff. Like, by the way, that's the way OIS actually works on these periscope telephotos. They're not moving the actual lenses around. They're moving the prism around to compensate for the shake. And so I think this is very exciting to me. Like, Can't wait to see a techno phone with this. What are your thoughts on this first bit of news?
This is really exciting. I want to see how this works because this could be the beginning of a big revolution in the camera space in smartphones. Having that variable zoom in a compact periscope solution means that you don't need maybe another telephoto or to have 4 cameras on your phone. You might just need the 2.
Yeah.
And this is like, in terms of difficulty, do you remember we had the Samsung Galaxy S8?
Yes.
Which had variable aperture, and we've had a few smartphones since.
Oh, Huawei has been doing it, and Honor to some extent, quite often since then, yeah.
Yeah, so having variable aperture was in of itself revolutionary, but this is 100 times more difficult because you're doing it with a periscope zoom. You have to have a bit of accuracy in how that light is being refracted through the lenses and focused at the other end on the sensor. It's crazy. And so I'm very excited about that because when we're talking about, say, the Motorola Edge 70 being super slim, the iPhone Air, this is the solution to that, as in it gives you that one module that solves the problem of having multiple modules.
Exactly.
And obviously durability, you mentioned image stabilization. It will also be interesting to see in day-to-day use from normal people, if they drop the phone, if they use it on a bike, how will the lenses handle that sort of life
abuse
thrown at them?
That's a good point. They call it freeform continuum telephoto, by the way. So that's, the exciting part here of this.
Wait, did they say AI anywhere by any chance?
I didn't look. I try to avoid. I think I'm like naturally avoiding the AI. If I see it, I just kind of deny it. But the second thing, the dual mirror reflect telephoto is an interesting one. This is basically like a telescope. There are 2 types of telescopes where, you're looking through the end of the telescope and there's a mirror at the front of the telescope, the one pointed at the sky, that has a hole in it. And then there's a mirror, closer to the end where you're looking. And, the light bounces through the hole into the mirror at the bottom, and then bounces back up to the edges of that opening at the top, and then bounces right back into your objective and you're seeing. But this is basically taking that concept and shrinking it down Z-depth wise so that you have a telephoto that is more compact than even a dual prism periscope, which is basically the technique that Apple pioneered with the iPhone 15 Pro and Pro Max, I think it was, where it's a folded lens, but it's a Z shape, right? Instead of an L shape, which is the traditional periscope telephoto for the light path, it's a Z shape. And so the sensor is actually kind of parallel to the lens. And so the light goes down, bounces off into 2 prisms. And they call it tri-prism usually because they have to put a third prism between the main 2 mirror prisms. But the bottom line is it's much more compact. And as you've seen, OnePlus has been using, and Oppo have been using that kind of like dual path or a Z path or whatever we will call M path, or, oh my God, I'm talking Star Trek empath.
Yes.
Basically the tri-prism, dual mirror, 1 prism thing for a while now on the OnePlus 13, OnePlus 15, Oppo Find X8 Pro, and I think the 8 Ultra as well. So, it's there. It's pretty common nowadays, but this could shrink all this down even further. What are your thoughts on that approach?
Honestly, when you think about it, most people just want good pictures. So lightly bouncy, pretty picky. That's what we're
Will
after.
it work? Yes.
Does it work or not? And more importantly, does it last the lifetime of the phone? The more complex they get, the more my worry is there's moving parts which will potentially throw up problems.
I think there's less moving parts here than in the other system, right? Like, I mean, this is not a variable zoom in terms of, as far as I can understand, this is just a way to make it much more compact.
Yes, but we mentioned image stabilization earlier.
Yeah,
Are the prisms moving or are they fixed? Because
good question.
That's an extra component, an extra prism that, if it is stabilized, will be causing problems. I'm not the expert here, but my thoughts are with the users who are going to be spending potentially a lot of money on these gadgets, on these phones. and they might be a bit disappointed after they stop working as expected.
Yeah.
Because life has been thrown at them.
So my very complicated description of the telescope earlier is called a catadioptric telescope. You guys can Google that. But anyway, this is really kind of interesting. It does lose one stop of light, though, this setup, right? Because you have a lot of mirrors and things in there. But I still think this is very cool. And I'm really happy to see, Techno and Infinix pushing the envelope with their technology and their partnership. These are brands that we don't think about much, but every time I play with one of their phones, I'm really impressed. And they're super popular in countries like Africa, India, and other places in the eastern bloc of Europe as well, Russia, etc. So I think this is cool, and I'm really glad that they're kind of pushing the envelope.
And more importantly, who are the other companies that will be using similar components in a year or two?
It's going to lead to some copycats and or some people licensing their technology, inevitably, right? So that's actually good news for them. Yeah, so hey, let's talk about EVs a bit, because I finally got to sit in the BMW iX3, the first Neue Klasse car. So, it's like, I didn't drive it. I know you'll see some first drives, like Tim Stevens drove it for The Verge, and Tim was my editor at Engadget, and we're good friends, and he's a great car journalist, and I strongly suggest, I'll put the link in the show notes, I strongly suggest you go check out the Verge story. But I got, about 2 weeks ago, I was invited by BMW in a Santa Monica event, and we got to basically sit in the car and play with the technology. And yeah, I mean, for me, as a tech journalist who covers cars, the focus was on technology. Of course, I'd like to drive the car. It's going to happen soon. I'm sure that they'll have a US first drive. The one that Tim wrote about was in Spain, and somehow I did not get invited. But my point is that this is a big car for BMW, because it is kind of like, I don't know what nth generation this would be for BMW, but in terms of the public, this is really like this for proper second gen product. I mean, you could talk, the i3, the original, city car, was kind of Gen 0 in my book. Car like the i4 and the i5 and the i7 and the iX today are like Gen 1 in my book. Other than the iX, a lot of these share a common platform between the gas hybrid and electric versions, which creates a whole bunch of compromises in terms of packaging and space and other compromises that I just generally don't like no frunk, for example. All EVs should have a frunk, in my opinion. That's just me. Probably because I've owned so many Teslas in the past. But the point I'm making is that this is, Neue Klasse is what they called the cars that we think of as BMW today, right? So, the reason BMW became popular in the 70s and 80s and 90s is because of, it all started with Neue Klasse in the late 60s. And then they're doing Neue Klasse version 2 now, where they're realizing that they can't continue doing what they're doing. They really have to go all in on a completely new architecture. And they've done that with this Neue Klasse version 2, Neue Klasse now. And this car, the iX3, is the first. There is also going to be an i3, which is going to be the sedan version. This is a small SUV or medium SUV. It's about the same size as a gasoline BMW X3, right? Same cargo capacity, same dimensions, same amenities roughly. But in North America here, it only costs about 10,000 more. So the gas model, which is an older car now, is 50 grand. And this iX3 is going to be about 60. They didn't give specific pricing, but 60 grand for a car with 400, this is proper 400 miles of range. Most of the competition right now, like Model Y, is at 350 miles or so. So 400 miles of range, 400 kilowatt of charging speeds is kind of insane. That's the highest, that's one of the highest, fastest charging cars you can get, assuming you can find a charger that charges that fast. So that's very exciting to me, because it means that they're finally competitive. But, there's a lot, they've been teasing this car and the Neue Klasse cars in general for 2 years now. We've seen bits and pieces released here and there. We all know that you can hype things to death, and it's also about the experience in the end, right? So I can't speak about the driving. You should read Tim's story for that. And from what I hear from not just Tim, but everyone I've talked to in the car journalist space, everyone has said, Miriam, this is a milestone of a car. And as an EV enthusiast, you will enjoy it too when you drive it. I believe that. But for me, the experience was production car, static display, sitting in it, fully powered, playing with the tech. And I have to say, I've always said that having an iPad in the middle of your car is the only thing that matters. Like, we all know how to use an iPad. Like, why make it more complicated than that, right? Like, my biggest beef right now with a lot of the car manufacturers, especially the Germans, is that how baroque and overly designed their user interfaces are, right?
They love their gradients.
Like Mercedes, BMW, even Porsche, like, it's just too much. And I'm not anti-screen at all. And I'm also not anti-manual controls. I want some basic controls. I think like things like temperature, fan speed, volume should be physical buttons that are always active, and basic things like defrost, all that stuff should always be there. But for example, I'm a big believer that you don't need controls for lighting. Because it should be auto, the default for driving. And then, yeah, it's fine if you want to go in a touch screen and change it, maybe because you're trying to sneak up on your neighbors for a surprise or something, whatever. But that doesn't need a control, right? I would even argue that windshield wipers can have limited controls because auto wipers these days work really well. Now, you can argue with me and I'm okay with that, but I'm just saying that there are some things I want physical and some things I'm willing to, like power buttons on EVs are totally vestigial. They don't need to exist. Press the brake pedal and just start. That's the way it should be. But this car is, I think, an improvement because even though it's got that skinning of the iDrive and the kind of a baroque and overly decorated interface and that slanted center screen, like rhomboid shape, which is really weird, it does make sense. Like, it actually is relatively iPad-like to use. Like, a good example of a good interface, and I know a lot of you are going to be mad for me saying that, but this Tesla. Tesla makes a really great interface. It's easy to use. It's intuitive. It looks like an iPad. You don't have to drill down too many menus. A little bit too much menu drilling for my liking, but it's not bad. Rivian's great. Lucid, not bad. Chinese EVs in general, pretty great. But you look at, as I said, the Germans and stuff, the Americans and stuff, like GM makes great EVs, but the software experience, So here we have kind of like, I'm seeing an improvement in BMW's approach, and that really makes me happy. I hate the steering wheel. It's way too weird and complicated, and it has capacitive buttons on it, which is, can we please move away from that? I am a big believer in, again, Tesla, I think, nailed it. And Rivian's doing it, and Lucid's doing it. 2 scroll wheels or scroll surfaces that are, have some kind of tactile feedback, so you're scrolling, and they can be contextual somewhat. We always know by default what they do. But then, if you are, for example, on the Teslas, if you still have the stock, if you tap the end of the stock to get a wipe of the wipers, like you want to force a wipe, there's a physical button for that. It's either on the steering wheel or on the stock, and you click that. That a little menu pops up at that point on the display. And if you use the scroll wheel, you can change the speed of the wipers. So to me, you can, to some extent, replace physical controls with steering wheel controls that are well thought out, right? Like, I think that for critical things like lighting and wipers, and this is how Tesla does it, you have a single push button somewhere that's physical, and it brings up a menu that if you can change it with a scroll wheel on a steering wheel, you're doing fine. It's a good compromise because then you don't have to have a dedicated control for that.
I would agree, as long as you have a heads-up display or in front of your eye line of sight, so you don't have to look down to the left. So
speaking of, that's the next treat that BMW gives us on the iX3 and the Neue Klasse cars. So what I'm trying to get to is I'm happy to see that they have made a more like an easier to use software experience on this main screen. And it ties a lot with the steering wheel controls, which I think is smart. It doesn't have physical dedicated controls, unfortunately, for temperature and climate. That's at the bottom of a permanent thing on the screen. It also has a stupid, annoying adjusting the vent position is also electronic. I don't like that. I think that it's just so much easier to reach for the thing and move it where you want it. BMW shouldn't have done that. Mercedes does it right on the E-Class, where they have physical controls for the vents, but they're electric. So they remember their position, right? So,
Good.
You know what I'm saying? Like, you can, when you change driver, like they readjust, They move to the position that, you know what I'm saying? That, but you can override by hand. That's smart. But Polestar is a really good example of a super clean and Volvo user interface. It's like, it's so few drilling down in menus. Everything is big touch surfaces. You cannot miss, even if the car is bouncing around a B road in England. It's great, right? I think that's what we need, not this overly Baroque and decorated stuff. So I think BMW's heading in the right direction. But this heads-up display thing you're talking about, they've done a crazy thing. Essentially, you know how the bottom of our windshield in all of our cars have this blacked out area that's painted on, yeah? Generally, it's like to prevent glare. It's generally around the entire periphery of glass on modern cars. It's on all the windows that are glued in place, not the moving windows like your door windows, but any little quarter windows, the rear hatch, the front windscreen. You've noticed they all have this black rim around them, and sometimes the little black dots that kind of fade the rim to the glass.
That's for heat dissipation.
So, it's there. So BMW had the bright idea of, what if we project a display that's at the base of the windshield into that area, right? So now it's not like a heads-up display because it's not floating ahead of you in your line of sight. It is on the glass at the bottom of the windshield, but it's an entire long,
it's a bit of a NASDAQ
60
ticker.
to 1 aspect ratio. You know what I'm saying? It's like super skinny and long. And then the cool thing is that the part in front of the driver cannot be modified, and it shows you the things you'd expect a heads-up display to show you, right? Or a gauge cluster to show you. And then the middle part and the passenger part, are all customizable, and you can put something like 6 or 8 widgets. And these widgets can be anything, like things like time to destination, tire pressure, like anything you want. And you can basically flick them up there from the main screen. Literally, there's a flip motion. You flick them up there and they stay there, and they can be configured to drive. You can change them while you're driving, whatever. It's really, really cool. In addition, as an option, this is optional, you can get a proper 3D heads-up display that you see through the windscreen, right? Like normal heads-up display, like what we're used to. But I think this idea of this widget bar, right, that shows permanent data for the driver and can be configured for the rest of the car is really smart, because that means you spend less time on that screen looking at status things. And if you can change a lot of things to the steering wheel controls, you can get that information and adjust it. So that's been my experience with the iX3. I spent about an hour playing with all the different things in the car. And yeah, I think it's very BMW. They're really trying to, make it their own vibe. In that sense, I wish it was more iPad-like and simpler like Polestar does, or Tesla, or Rivian, or Lucid. But I have to say it's way less convoluted than iDrive or whatever it is today is, right? So in that sense, kudos to BMW. That's my quick take.
Yeah. I'm not so into the native software or the sort of application layer on the car as much as I am into Android Auto or
So you're a projection person.
I'm a projection person, but also I use the actual car's native stuff. So I have an EV. It's an MG4.
Yeah, I know.
If you take the sticker off, it's an SAIC car from China. My wife actually ordered a BMW iX3 competitor this morning.
Wow, fantastic.
So, but she went again because we're quite happy with the MG, and the actual car software is irrelevant to us because we just use Android Auto. We went for the MG S5, which is a medium SUV, which is made by SAIC. How does Android Auto work on the iX3? Is it
so it does have Android Auto and CarPlay. I don't know. It has the basic stuff. This is a big problem for me as somebody who, as you know, live in a massively vast country. Both Canada and the US, the two countries I live in, are massively vast. That was good. That's the
yes, that's a good one.
And I'm saying, I think that they are, I need the route planning. I need the Tesla route planning. I need to be able to tell it, I know exactly, based on the temperature of the battery, to me, this is critical. Like, I don't know how much you road trip in your cars, but if you're just driving around town in an EV, you don't need any of that. You can use Android Auto, CarPlay all day long. But as soon as you go from, like, say here, I'm in Vancouver right now. If I want to drive to San Francisco in an EV, I need route planning. I need it to be able to tell me exactly where I'm going to stop, for how long, based on the weather conditions, the battery state of charge, the availability of charging spots in that location, the speed of the chargers, all of that. And
so we have that in the UK.
On Android Auto?
On Android Auto, it does it. So I use...
But he doesn't know the state of charge of your battery when you start. So how does it know?
So if you have... There's an app for Android Auto called iX3. So it's my energy supplier who does the smart charging and that. And so it knows the state of charge of the car. It does your route planning for you. And it also integrates with the chargers that are part of your energy supplier's discount rate. So I get discounted electricity.
But you still
on
don't get
Motos.
things like battery temperature optimizations or anything like that, right? Like, that's a big deal.
So that's a big deal if your car doesn't factor that in. And it does the Tesla starting off at very high numbers and then suddenly dropping midway through the charge, because it's all about perception rather than the actual start and end state of your battery life. From my experience, having used Kia EVs, having used Polestar and Chinese EVs, that's not really much of an issue, because you get an accurate readout of, according to the conditions, what your actual range will be. So we don't have that type of range anxiety, because for example, I drive from Edinburgh to London. What about in the winter
when it's really cold? You can't really predict. As the temperature drops outside while you're driving, like, your battery's getting heated more and more, and so now your range is dropping. And on cars that are accurate, you literally see the range dropping, and so it needs to be able to modify the rest of the route to charge you earlier. Does it do this in real time?
From my experience with the Octopus iX3 app, which I use, Octopus is the energy supplier. Yes, it works.
So is it plugged into your ODB port?
I think because the SAIC is running on Android Automotive, there's a handover between Android Automotive underlying the car operating system to Android Auto. But to give you some context, this January, there's a car reviewer journalist called James May, who used to be on
I know
Top
that
Gear
guy.
So he has a lovely pub down in England near Salisbury. And Candice and I have been going there for a few years. Just nice long weekend break, amazing food.
And just so you know, folks, you are in Scotland right now. So that,
yes, I'm in Scotland, which is up north and a lot colder. But in January, we left, I think it was minus 6 degrees Celsius.
Oh, that's cold.
So what's that in freedom degrees?
It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. Anyway,
they'll figure it out.
So it was a cold, freezing morning. We set off from home with a 100% charged battery, and the 270 miles range that the car has on paper was adjusted the moment we left the drive to around about 200 miles. And that was accurate to the stop that we got through the iX3 app for our charger. We rapid charged 2 times to do a 600-mile journey, which was pretty accurate.
That's good.
And it worked for us. It will be interesting to see how that works on non-Android Automotive cars that maybe don't have that handoff.
I think for me, that's the thing. It's like, I don't have a problem with projection per se. I think it's very convenient, especially when you're renting cars. And me as a journalist, I review cars all the time. I get new cars all the time. It's very nice. And I mostly Android Auto since I'm a Pixel user, but I do sometimes use CarPlay every now and then with an iPhone just to keep up to date on what CarPlay does and how it behaves. But my biggest gripe is, like, again, coming from Tesla, it's like things like you get to the charger and you get the code for the bathroom displayed on the app. Like, it doesn't happen on Android Auto, right? Like, you get like all kinds of little things. And to me, it's like, I don't want my phone to be charging and overheating and constantly like being, like, I'd rather pay $10 a month data subscription to Tesla or whatever, or Rivian, and have a really seamless experience right in the car. And because of the app, the Tesla app or the Rivian app or the GM app, whatever, GM app is not that good. That's a bad example, but I'm just saying the app in the car for the car that lets you do like precondition the climate, all that, that's the app that should be the conduit between things like your messaging apps and the OS. It's like projection light in a way, right? It's just creating a conduit. But I still feel like my entertainment experience, like music, like I want YouTube Music as an app. I don't want to use my phone or Bluetooth or projection for that. Like that's my silo. There is a Spotify app for most platforms these days out there, but I really want that experience to be a separate experience. In the same way as when I use an iPad, I'm not projecting my phone to the iPad. I'm logging in with my Apple ID, you know, and I got everything.
But we'll see. It's an interesting time because this is tradition. We're talking about BMW, who have wanted to have end-to-end control over the car and the software, and they were very resistant to Android Auto and CarPlay.
Yes.
This is them starting to mellow a bit.
Yes.
They're also copy Google and Apple's homework for their own user interfaces and usability. So we're going to be in a next 10, 15 years of constant change. This is exciting for us.
I agree. No, this is good news. I mean, overall, as I said, this iX3 was very exciting, and I think that they're heading in the right direction. I'm actually more excited about this, the charging speeds and the efficiency of the car, the range and all that. The technology, the 800-volt battery architecture that they put in this car, that's really competitive and ahead, you know, of most of the competition short of China right now for a European brand. And, you know, for the technology, I think it's heading in the right direction. I'm still a big believer in preferring using the built-in system if possible, especially most of them in North America, if they're not Tesla or Rivian or Lucid, are Android Automotive with Google. So like I can log in with my Google account and all my stuff pops up and works. It's great. So I don't really, it's what I described with the iPad, where you log in with the Apple ID and everything works.
Yeah.
And more apps are available from the Play Store on these platforms now. So GM's like that, Polestar's like that. By the way, little side note, the people out there using a Rivian and a Lucid, you're running Android Automotive as well, but you're running it without GAS, which is Google Automotive Services. So you don't have your Google login functionality, but you're getting Google Maps and you're getting the Assistant, you're getting all that stuff, just, you know, Rivianified and Lucidified. So just be aware that there are cars out there running Android Automotive where you can't log in with your Google account, but you're getting essentially Android on the bottom end of it.
It's a good operating system for its purpose.
It's pretty solid.
And it's always good to see that poor old Stellantis is always making everyone else look good.
Yes. You know, it's interesting too that I want to point out that I feel like we're back where we were 15 years ago with smartphones in the EV world in terms of the software experience, like all this excessive skinning and like everybody's not doing quite the right thing. And like, you know, it's kind of where we're at. Give it another 5-10 years and I think we'll be where we were with smartphones today, where it's just seamless and it just works and it's nice and it's, you know, you can switch from a Samsung to an Oppo to a Pixel and it's not completely devastatingly different like it was when the days of TouchWiz on Samsung and HTC Sense, you know, and everybody had their custom skin and it was just a terrible experience all around. So that's kind of feel like where we're at with EVs right now.
I agree. We're still in the early phases. It's a bit of a wild west out there. With regards to platforms. Sadly, that will also have an impact on car resale value and their utility in the longer term, but still early days.
Yeah, I mean, there is a bit of headroom there. A lot of that software is over-the-air updatable. So yeah, eventually you'll fall off the cliff. Like I even noticed this, my first generation Model 3, when I traded in for a second generation, and just so you know, I don't have a Tesla right now, I wouldn't get one because of Elon, but I had 2 Model 3s in a row for 3 years each. And the software was getting updates on my first car still after 3 years, and it was improving all the time. But it was limited as to what it inherited from the newer cars. Like it was,
yeah, the feature set
was a bit more reduced. Now, my second car obviously had a newer computer and everything, and it was getting much better new stuff. So, but my point is, these early Model 3s are still supported, and they're still getting software updates, and it's been 2017 were the first model sold in North America. So we're almost 10 years in, right? And so that tells you that there is a bit of bandwidth there in getting software updates for these vehicles. So you're not completely dead in the water. Yeah. But that's Tesla, which is the best at doing updates. So I'm kind of hoping Rivian's pretty damn good too. They do monthly updates as well. But I feel like, what's it going to be like for BMW i4 owner right now, right? What's it going to be like for an EQS Mercedes owner, right? Oof.
Yeah, so if you boot up the Stellantis operating system, I'm pretty sure it says Research in Motion underneath the label.
QNX, yeah. No, QNX is a pretty strong player in that field, actually. Yeah,
it is, but not from a user interface standpoint.
No, just the back end stuff, all
the
security and the real timeness of the thing. Yeah, for sure. Listen, we should wrap up, Matteo. Do you want to tell people where they can find you on the internet?
Sure. So you can find me on my YouTube channel. It's called Tech Travel Geeks.
Yes.
We cover consumer electronics, gadgets, accessories, anything that makes the travel experience better. It's my friend Lukasz and I. We used to work in the travel industry in tech, and it is a passion of ours. If you think about it, when you travel, Miriam, you travel a lot. I follow you on Instagram. Those gadgets we've been talking about for the last hour, those really do improve your life when traveling. So that's our passion. And I'll be at CES if you're there as well in January. So message me also on Threads. I'm at Todoleo, Tango Oscar Delta Oscar Lima Echo Oscar. And yeah, that's me. Thanks for having me again, Miriam.
Absolutely. Anytime. You know where to find me, folks. I'm at Tankgirl. That's TNKGRL. Like the comic book character, drop all the vowels and you get my handle pretty much everywhere, except TikTok, where you have to add 69 at the end. That's my year of birth. Don't make silly jokes. TNKGRL 69 on TikTok, TNKGRL everywhere else. I am pretty much mostly active on Instagram, Threads, and Blue Sky. So follow me on those platforms, follow Matteo on those platforms, check out Tech Travel Geeks. You know where the podcast lives. It's mobiletechpodcast.com. We're on all the major podcasting platforms. So please subscribe if it's your first time here. If your app lets you rate or review the show, please consider doing that. That would be really helpful. There's a YouTube channel as well, youtube.com/mobiletechpodcast. There's some unboxings, hands-ons, reviews, and some snippets of the podcast on there. So check it out. You know how YouTube works. Like, subscribe. Tell your friends, click the bell, comment, all that good stuff. And finally, there's a Patreon. I mentioned it briefly. If you want a video version of this podcast where you can see our faces and we sometimes show devices and sometimes we go overtime and then I leave extra content and bloopers in there, check out the Patreon, patreon.com/Tankgirl. That's patreon.com/TNKGRL. You can support me by paying $5 a month for a podcast every week that you get a day in advance. So a day in advance every week for $5 a month. If you can do that, support me. I would appreciate it. Patreon.com/TNKGRL. And I want to thank our sponsor, Mint Mobile. You know I review a lot of phones, so I'm constantly juggling multiple devices. While that's fun, it also means I'm spending a lot of money for wireless service on multiple SIMs. Thankfully, there's Mint Mobile, and that's who I'm teaming up with for today's podcast. If you want to save money on your wireless service, switch to Mint Mobile. You've probably seen the Mint Mobile ads featuring Ryan Reynolds, but let me quickly tell you how fantastic their service is, especially for tech-savvy early adopters like us. Mint Mobile offers premium wireless for as low as $15 a month, and you don't have to sacrifice any coverage, speed, or data. They're built on the nation's largest 5G network. They keep costs low because they sell direct to you online. They cut out the retail stores and salespeople. Why should you pay more than you have to for access to the same network? In my experience testing phones, Mint Mobile delivers the same data speeds and call quality as the big three for a fraction of the cost. Switching to Mint is super easy. Thanks to their eSIMs, you can sign up and activate immediately right on your phone from the comfort of your home. No more standing around waiting in line at a big wireless store. You can keep your current devices and phone number and easily switch services. And if your phone isn't eSIM compatible, Mint will ship you a new SIM card free of charge. The whole process only takes 15 minutes, and if you get stuck, Mint has a great customer service team to get you through it. All Mint Mobile plans include unlimited nationwide talk and text, plus lightning-fast 5G and free mobile hotspot. Mint will show you how much data you use each month and recommend plans that save you money. Mint also offers a modern family plan that lets you set up a super affordable family plan with as little as 2 lines. Use my link, mintmobile.com/mobiletech, to get premium wireless starting at $15 a month. Stop paying more than you need on your wireless bill and start saving big with Mint Mobile. And Matteo, thanks again for being my guest. I really appreciate you being back on the show.
Oh, thank you for having me. And thanks for listening to me, people, if you made it this far.
Folks, stay tuned. I'll have Matteo back on in the future, and we'll have another podcast next week. So until then, cheers, everybody.
This has been the Mobile Tech Podcast with Tank Girl, proudly presented by worldpodcasts.com. You can visit us online at mobiletechpodcast.com.